devastating and deadly air and missile attacks on civilian targets.
The Ukrainian government has come out calling these attacks on civilians nothing short of war crimes.
Recent Russian attacks in Ukrainian cities, including on hospitals and civilians fleeing, have some Ukrainians declaring that war crimes are occurring. But the international community, including the US, is saying legal assessments need to be made before that distinction can be made clear. But if war crimes are happening, what evidence is needed? And will there be any consequences for perpetrators while the war continues?
The biggest misconception is that dead civilians automatically mean that a crime has been perpetrated. It may not tragically, in fact, be a crime. They may be lawful collateral damage, if I could put it in that way, and just general carnage to civilians and civilian infrastructure is nowhere near enough upon which to bring a prosecution. Ultimately, what investigators like my colleagues and myself will be looking for is materials generated by the attacking force. Because at the end of the day, we have to understand what the objective of the attacking force is or was in a particular situation.
Beyond footage of an attack and its aftermath, documentation of intent is important for criminal investigators. Experts say that it's both a difficult and slow process to gather evidence and eventually bring perpetrators to court.
It appears that the Russian forces are reverting to the use of very heavy support fire rockets, artillery systems against areas filled with civilian objects. Using that weaponry in and of itself is not a crime, but bringing it to bear without distinction, this is the legal term, between lawful military targets and the civilians in proximity to those defending forces, or indeed civilians nowhere near those defending forces, that's unlawful.
Visual evidence of attacks, taken by either civilians on cell phones or photojournalists, are important tools for building cases, but they're only a small part of what investigators need eventually to bring a case to court.
We look for documentation generated by the attacking force, in this case the Russian forces, maps, reports, returns, operational orders, and this stuff will be turning up. The Ukrainians will be picking this stuff up off the battlefield, out of the vehicles they've destroyed, off prisoners, from the dead. Is there an order that simply says hit such and such series of grid squares without any specificity in terms of what the target is? Now, in and of itself, again, this doesn't lead to a conviction, but a criminal case is composed of quite a multitude of interlocking pieces in that metaphorical puzzle.
While evidence is collected and organized by the Ukrainian government and international organizations like the International Criminal Court and Amnesty International, bringing perpetrators to justice will still require major cooperation from both sides when the conflict ends.
The Russian state is not about to collapse, so that's the first issue. The Ukrainian government may tragically be defeated, which will actually complicate the investigative process because the country will be occupied by hostile forces hostile to criminal justice. So the real challenge is going to lie in apprehending the suspects. You know, if there's sufficient evidence, for example, to charge Vladimir Putin, the prospects of him being detained are, I would say, in the short and medium term, not that great.
Investigators like Wiley say criminal courts could issue sealed indictments or sealed warrants that aren't known to the public for years. But if that wanted individual were to enter a country under a criminal court's jurisdiction, they could be apprehended.
It's not Russia that's going to be put on trial. The whole purpose of international justice is to establish the criminal responsibility of individuals. So ultimately, you need to build cases specific to those individuals. And that's what takes time.